Hello there, Kevin Wheeler's joined us. Thank you for being with us today. I gave a very brief introduction before, but let me go a little bit deeper. This has been a difficult introduction to write because, Kevin, you have an amazing career that spanned a lot of time, and I call you the expert on water heaters and water products. So anyway, Kevin, as I mentioned, is President, Chairman, and CEO of A.O. Smith, a Milwaukee-based company that's one of the leading global manufacturers of water heaters and boilers. I've personally owned, I can't tell you, countless numbers of your products. They manufacture and market a wide variety of products under 19 brands in over 60 countries, have operations in the US, Canada, Mexico, China, India, UK, the Netherlands, and Turkey. There's a management issue, particularly during a pandemic. We'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, Kevin began his career in 1984 with the White Water Heater Company, joined A.O. Smith in 94 as the regional sales manager, and since then, his assignments have been global, including assignments to the Netherlands, responsibilities for the Middle East and Europe, in addition to the domestic postings. So it's, as I mentioned before, it's safe to say that we have an expert with us in the world of manufacturing, particularly in the plumbing and water products area. So thank you for joining us. I'm not kidding, 200 questions for you today. And as we had a panel before, which was talking about innovation in manufacturing, and it's a lot of these people run innovation centers, and they're talking about the next kind of wave and how manufacturing is done. But first, I'd like to start kind of bigger. My dad ran a manufacturing company who made stainless steel sinks, and he was proud to say he was number 2. But then he would always laugh, but number 1 is 10 times bigger than we are. So he was number 2 in a market that had a much bigger player than he is. So in general trends, we've talk about your product in the world market. We've seen big run-ups in things that go into buildings, things that go into residential, into commercial, and industrial. So we see them come up, we've seen them come down. How has that played into your business and your kind of planning for manufacturing as we're talking about, during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic?
Well, well, thank you. It's great to join you. I didn't realize I'd be the only panelist. The other one had 3 or 4, which was kind of nice to have.
Sorry, you're one-on-one with you. You're a global perspective person today.
Well, again, you talked about going into the pandemic and that was survival, and no one knew where we were going to go. We had a number of initiatives that we were working on from a manufacturing standpoint on a global basis, and so you had to stabilize your workforce and make sure, again, safety was our top priority as we were going through there, and of course taking care of the customer, and so that was going in and finding a way to manufacture and make your people feel comfortable. But then as things stabilized pretty quickly, nobody knew we would come out of it as quickly as we did, and they were talking about different kinds of alphabets, W's, U's, D's, hockey sticks, that kind of thing, and we came out really strong. And so that is on your prior panel, they were just talking about it. The number one issue that we had to continue to work through is your supply chain, and realizing that all the things that you've had in the past set you up well, but they all could be a possible negative as you were managing through this right now. Having a global supply chain made it just more difficult. So when I look at, I don't think we're a post-COVID yet. I think we're still learning through that. But again, as a manufacturer, we're certainly going to change the way we'll modify our supply chain for sure. And we already have as we go through it. It was interesting, just in time now, just in case. I heard that just before, and certainly we're moving a bit differently than we have. Okay, and so we're looking internally as an organization to make sure that if we're fairly vertically integrated. That's a really important part of our business, where we've always had to have a perfect ROI to make that come in-house. Now, maybe not so much anymore. There's a bit of emergencies and covering, you know, some possible catastrophes that happen in the market that we're baking in a bit more as an organization. We're looking at localizing more. And as a manufacturer, you know, there's a lot of our components are ones that are very specific. They're certified. You have long-term relationships. But before it was kind of, hey, you know, if you have some inventory somewhere in North America, that's good enough. That may not be good enough anymore going forward. So we're looking at that, making sure that our dual sourcing is appropriate for critical components. So I would say in general, we're really looking at our overall geographic footprint. Does it make sense where we're at? And I think where we're concentrated. So we're looking at our supply chain really closely. There's a lot of talk about visibility down your supply chain. That sounds really good, but it's exceptionally complicated to do. It doesn't mean that you don't. Cybersecurity is a big issue. So, you know, linking into other people's systems isn't exactly one that companies are thrilled to do. But you know, I think having that visibility and that vision down the supply chain, we'll start with our critical components and work our way down and continue to find that balance. There's always upstream and downstream. It's hard to get around that, but what it's proven to us is that as we are, I think, a pretty good operational team, we found out that we had some gaps there. So supply chain is a big one, and then always had automation, you know, manufacturing 4.0, we're working towards that. And for us, that's accelerated. You know, I think some of the labor issues you're hearing about and everybody has, they're not going to go away. We're going to have to manage our way through those and using the various, you know, we've always used automation in our factories to move things from point A to B. But now it's becoming, even in the transportation side, we're looking at it differently. As a company, we like big orders, big trucks, and ship them to one destination. That's probably going to change. So cost won't be the only driver anymore. It's going to be that risk mitigation. You have to balance that. I'm not sure where that's going to be, but it's one that we're working through as a company. And that will evolve over time, but supply chain will certainly look different. Our factories, there may not always have been an ROI, but there is now with costs going up and everything that happened on your inbound freight and costs like that. So as an organization, we're moving faster to automate our facilities because we can, and we're looking at our distribution both inbound on components and outbound much differently than we have in the past.
So about the supply chain issues, that's of course the #1 thing you see on television everywhere that you go, but I have to say it's all focused on us. Are you seeing similar supply chain challenges globally? Are we seeing the same thing with, you know, shipping containers being a problem? Is it raw materials? What do you see in the supply chain globally? Everyone knows what many people know what our issues are, but are we the same as everybody else? Or are there like pockets of things that are much easier or pockets where things are much worse?
Yeah, I would never say they're much easier anywhere, but they are different. You know, our operation is very North America centric, China centric, business in India and so forth. I would say the US, North America is much more challenged because we have not only supply chains, but we have inflation. And inflation has, from our perspective, been a much more of a North America issue, particularly a US issue that we've had to work through. But every one of our businesses around the world has some type of supply chain challenges. You know, I mean, if you do anything with electronics, you're really not going to get away from chips and sensors and things of that nature. But so we're experiencing in most of our areas, but I would tell you, North America is probably our biggest challenge still, and managing through it. But no one's been has not had these happen to their businesses. They're just in different degrees of effectiveness and issues that we've had. But what I can tell you, it's interesting though, when you work with good suppliers, good companies, you know there's a long-term end because we're all working collectively. This is not a, hey, A.O. Smith's going to solve this, or you know, it's on our shoulders. It goes across our supply chain. It goes across our customer base. And so we are working together. But I would tell you, to answer your original question, it's for us, it's much more U.S. North America centric. That seems to be getting a little bit better, but I would tell you it's going to carry into 2022 without a doubt, from my perspective.
One of my questions was going to be forecast and timeline, because all the experts that you see have differing opinions, and I'm not sure there's an answer to that. You kind of gave it to us. We talked about inflation a little bit. I was at the very beginning of my career when my father was in manufacturing. I went into a different field, but I always thought of his work as really playing a three-dimensional chess game, because you've got all the different axes and everything going in different ways with lots of different parts, and not necessarily everyone's your adversary, but there are a lot of people who are your adversaries, a lot of people who are your partners. You talked about your suppliers. The government has taken a bigger role in a lot of our lives during the pandemic, and you work across many different countries, states, counties, municipalities. And a couple of days ago, we had a panel on about workforce development and one on the basic economy, and there were discussions about the kind of conflicting orders, if you will, at the government level. So have you in your business, we talked about, actually we had a gentleman on from Zurn Water Solutions yesterday. He was talking about the kind of how you worked through that. So at kind of the top level, how do you deal with different countries with different demands? And had you standardized sort of across? Did you do a more of a local implementation? How did you deal with the kind of changing landscape of government interaction with your business during the pandemic?
Yeah, I don't think we're unique at all, but one of our strategies as we do business in various countries, we really use local management, and so it's how we deal with it is over the years. If we're doing business in North America, if it's government, we have government affairs people working with the government. We want to be part of the solution. We want to be part of the dialogue in making sure that all points of interest are heard, and not just from A.O. Smith's point of interest. So, being local here, but I would tell you in China, we're no different. It's a local management team, gets up every day in the market. We work hard at working with provincial government officials, working with industry participants. All that pays off in times that we're in now because we have those relationships. And so each country is a little bit different. We don't have a standard approach. It depends on the country that we're in. We always do business a certain way at A.O. Smith, so that's not a compromise. But how we deal with the various constituents in those markets is customized because it is different. So that's how we've dealt with it. You've heard in China there's energy issues. Well, we're part of that right now. We're dealing with the local governments and making sure that they understand what we need and how we can help. Again, it goes back. It's not always about helping us. It's also what can we do from our operational standpoint to be maybe part of the solution. So we engage in the country that we're in. We do business for the most part. A.O. Smith doesn't use a low-cost platform where we ship from. Wherever we do business is where we do business. So we get up every day selling in those markets. And so, and it's proved to be beneficial long-term because I'm never going to have the cultural sensitivity or the feel for the markets and the systems and so forth in say China or India when I'm US based. And so our teams have been dealing with those and using that local knowledge and those local relationships and being part of that community to guide us through what we've been kind of working through for the past couple of years.
So your company being, I guess, more locally centric, if you will, was already positioned to react in each of your markets in a way that would be appropriate for the market.
Yeah, I like to say that was a great strategy on our part.
Planned.
But what I can tell you, it is a strategy on our part, but not so much for, I don't think anybody prepares for a pandemic, okay? But those philosophies are strategies and how we've gone about doing business in the countries that we do business in has proved to be a good model as we're working through these difficult and challenging times.
I agree with that. But let's switch. You mentioned automation before, and yesterday's panels were about innovation, about the workplace and the workforce. And a big part of, we had a manufacturer on yesterday who was talking about the significant transition, especially even pre-pandemic, the natural direction toward automation in higher efficiency and a little more quality control in the outcome. And then that, I think, has been accelerated through the pandemic. And one of the reasons we see these workforce shortages, particularly in that thing, I read a bunch of research. There's that in 2010, what a study was done about the kind of the gap in workers and basically STEM fields, and that included high-tech manufacturing. We were going to be 20 million jobs short by 2030. So we're getting close to that. And then you look at kind of what's happened during the pandemic, and you have to do about spacing and all the other things. So I think your company's efficient, big, you've got big scale. You're planning these things far out. You were already doing automation. Has your it's hard to do something in 18 months, but has your direction shifted during that time about automation? What do you think you will be more automated more quickly, or are you kind of on the same path you had planned before?
I think we'll be automating more quickly. You know, it's, again, you go back to, and I mentioned this early in the conversation, we're a fairly disciplined organization, so everything we do has an ROI, right? And some of these areas, they weren't panning out. I mean, we knew the technologies were there. We knew that they had a place at A.O. Smith at some point in time. But now, as you're looking at the labor market being what it is, the cost of doing business has just escalated substantially. That these projects will move quicker now. And I think they'll move with not just what I said this period, not just with an ROI centric theme, but with a risk mitigation. What's good for the long term of our shareholders and our employees and our customers. And so we're moving some of these projects quicker, just for the fact that there's a need today, and we know that they're going to pay off long term. It's kind of like when you do standardization, a number of things you do, you can't point to it today, but you know it's the right thing to do. And so we're trying to balance that. But if you look at it, most of our automation is moving quicker, really using more kind of automated vehicle type of driverless, in your plants, things that in a water heater facility. And this is we're bending metal, we're spraying things, we're hanging them in ovens that are 1600 degrees. You just don't normally think about that. But now we have automated vehicles going down different aisles and bringing tanks to where they need to be, and things that I hadn't seen us hadn't thought we would be doing as early, but we're moving it much quicker, and for a lot of the right reasons. That's going to just continue. And through this whole process, nobody's losing their jobs. We're just changing their jobs. And you can't go from manual to automation usually that quickly. There's a step in between, and we're taking those steps. We're trying to bring our employees along. Again, we talked a little bit, I heard from your prior panel, there's a training aspect. It's not that it can't be done, but there's a training side of this that we have to put effort and energy to bring our people along. And it's not just, we've all had continuous improvement, we've all had lean initiatives. Sometimes they're very project-based, and we're trying to create a culture of that's what we do every day, and bring people along with their that they're part of the solution, and giving them the tools to help us do that. And that's a decade to 2 decade long process. Then you take that and you arm them with some automation. And I look at our factory as it goes forward, and our capacity will go up just because of our productivity. But it's looking a lot different today. When you walk through, you see automation everywhere. You see things being handled by robotics or by some type of sensor-driven piece of equipment. So that's going to continue to move forward. It's and by the way, this will be global in our perspective, because the challenges we have here are no different to some degrees in the other international markets that we do business. It's great to prove them out here if we can. By the way, it's great to standardize if you can do that as well. So you take a learned technology and you move it. We're doing more and more of that, where we're taking something that we've proven out here, tweak it maybe in China, and it turns into where we're sharing those best practices and those knowledge. So that's going to continue. Our people will be much more technical in our factories, but more importantly, I think more importantly, our people are going to have better business skills in our factory. It's not just about a piece of equipment doing a certain job. It's going to be about reading those analytics, understanding your customers better, and having a business approach where, if I would have said that maybe 10 years ago, that our people inside our four walls that are manufacturing products would need more business skills, you might have looked at me a little differently. And I do think there's a degree of technical and business skills that are emerging inside our four walls at all of our factories around the world.
And I've spoken with other local manufacturers here, and I've said very similar viewpoints. And I was told that it's easier to have someone who has manufacturing experience, particularly inside your four walls, to move them into the more automated age than it is to bring a brand new worker in who may or may not have any technical capabilities. So we're looking at kind of workforce issues. We talked about a little bit before on the previous panel, and it was a big part of yesterday. The kind of skill levels that are in the workplace. One of the reasons we have 11 million open jobs and 7 million unemployed Americans is the skill gap is there. So when you're doing hiring, there's natural attrition in any company. People are retiring or doing other things or whatever they do. And are you seeing that skills gap in your incoming employees? Are you needing to do kind of the basic training, particularly in the technically focused manufacturing jobs?
A.O. Smith has a lot of tenure. So if you look at our facilities, which I'm very proud of that, by the way, that we've had people work for us for decades and so forth. And what we're seeing is, as people come in, they're pretty smart. But particularly if they're coming out of some of the technical schools and even in the colleges, but they don't have the application or experience yet. And that's the part that it's you can have the education, if you will, but you have to mirror the two together. And the quicker you do that, you bring people up to speed. So for us, it's really trying to find the right people, but then having a program, if you will, that really drives the application. And it's not so much when we hire them, but can we do that in advance? Can we do it with local universities? Can we do it with local schools? Can we bring in co-ops and interns and all those other things that they probably won't all stay with us? I get that, but if we all do that, that application makes things really kind of come together, takes the theoretical, if you will, and puts it to the practical. And we live in the practical world, so I see that as our obligation to, yes, we have training for our employees. Yes, when we first started doing with robotics, we were scared to death whether we'd be able to maintain them. And what you do is you adapt, and you have those training programs, and you have those apprenticeship programs, and that's where I think we're doing a better job. Now we're trying to mirror up what people are learning and bringing them into our facility to bring that application, that practical experience that will help them and help us and all other manufacturers hit the ground running when they go off and start their careers.
Well, that's the people who were on the panel before. I wish they were here now because they'd be, of course, applauding because they're talking about that as kind of the thing. I mentioned before earlier on in our conversation that there was a big partnership between the auto manufacturers in in Kentucky, the state, the education system, to build a curriculum that would drive people literally from high school through either technical training or college curriculum and then into the manufacturing world, because the starting salaries in a good manufacturing job are just as good as most of the professional things you get out of a first year off college. So it's an interesting thing. So your model is almost for your technical employees, is almost the Procter & Gamble model for marketing. You know, they bring in everybody as junior brand managers, and after a few years, they all go off, work for other companies, start other ones, and they understand that. But if you look at the top ranks of Procter & Gamble, everybody's been there for 35 years. So you have that almost in manufacturing. You bring them in, you give them great talent, great skills, and the people who stay are your, like, I don't say lifers, but your dedicated employees over time.
Yeah, I look at it, and I don't want to give an impression that we have this program we've had for years. We're learning as we go, quite frankly, but we're doing a better job of that. And I've heard some people, you can't be afraid to train your people. You can't be afraid to make them better. And the chances are all I'm going to say, you use the word lifers. Well, no, they're not going to. But are we better off for the time that they were there? And did it make A.O. Smith a better company and be able to service our customers and so forth? And so that investment is an industry investment to some degree. In manufacturing, if anything, through the pandemic, everybody learned manufacturing is a pretty important part of what we do. Okay, and so that part of it, and having that attitude about, listen, we are going to train, we're going to put the best people out there, we're going to make them better, and at the end, we're going to let the chips fall. If you want to stay with A.O. Smith, terrific. You have a career path going through. You said this, I started out on the order entry desk. Okay, so that's been beneficial, and I think we're going to continue to probably enhance this with many more programs of almost overstaffing at a lower level, knowing that you're going to have that attrition, but you're going to have those diamond in the roughs come through and be part of your organization for a long time. And even if they're only there for a portion of the time, they're going to bring other people along. And that to me is a winning formula.
I can attest to that because I have been the kind of the recipient of that many times during my career. I've had brilliant people who have hired me with kind of as a bet because they were betting on potential, and I was lucky at the beginning to be able to do that. I'm not kidding. We've worked, so I know certain people from the beginning of my career, 35 years later, we've worked together again, or I've sent them, they've hired people who've worked for me. So it's honestly, I think that's a very productive way to think. We only got like a minute or two left. Big picture going forward. If I got a call once a million years ago, beginning my career, from somebody at the Chicago Tribune, asking me for I have a degree in economics. Okay, great. Asking me for my prediction on interest rates in the next year, and I gave them my prediction. Well, it came out, and there were three people quoted: me, some local bank guy, and the chief economist for the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. He and I agreed, so that was thrilling. So I always ask this question at the end: what's your big picture kind of focus, predictions, if you will? We're hopefully ending the pandemic soon. We will probably still have localized health issue that will be going forward. What are your kind of thoughts on the near term economic kind of situation?
Well, and I am not an economist, and I don't think I've ever been really right on any of this. But when I look at it, as we're heading in, we're in our planning season right now, right? I mean, that we're on a calendar year. I look at it. 2022 looks like to be a year, as long as something doesn't get in the way. Okay, but there's I think business is good. I think there's enough liquidity in the market. I think people have incomes and spending and so forth that we can go forward. But I also think you have to learn to live long term with COVID-19. It's not going to go away, and if it does, that's terrific. But it's on your employees' minds, it's on your customers' minds, and it's on the consumers' minds as you're going through that. So, managing through that. We didn't talk about our factories, but you come into our factories long term, they're going to look different, not only from a safety, but from a hygiene standpoint. But 2022, I think, looks pretty positive. Despite the supply chains and despite all the inflation, I think we're managing through it. Hopefully, we can, get through some of the potential COVID setbacks, depending on vaccination or not, and that type of thing. But those are still out there. But we're a resilient group. I think manufacturing is in great shape globally, quite frankly. We make products that make people's lives better. And so when you do that, I'm always optimistic. And I think as we go into 2022, I don't know what 2023 looks like. I try to go 1 year at a time, even though we're supposed to go 3 years at a time. But I think this is, we're still in great shape, providing that, there's not some unknown that we can't control anyway. But I believe we're going to be able to manage through. I think 2022 is going to be a good year. And I think people's lives are going to get a little bit better each and every quarter as we continue to navigate through these, unprecedented times.
I agree with all that. Thank you very much. Just so our listeners know, your company's done very well. Right after we formalized your participation, I saw come across the wire that you raised your cash dividend again, so your shareholders are pleased. And our chairman of the Alliance for Regional Development is one of your predecessors is president, chairman, and CEO of A.O. Smith. So we have a long history with your company at the Alliance.
Yeah.
Paul is on an airplane right now, or he would have stopped in to say hello. So
Paul's helped train us well as an organization, and I go back to, and I'll end this with this. Everything that we went through, it took all 15,000 employees. And if anything that I learned from the chairman right now, Mr. Jones, and so forth, it's the same thing as an organization. Yes, we raised our dividend. Yes, we're coming out of it better as an organization. But it's always, and I think everybody on this call would tell you, it's your people step up and you work with really good people within your organization. And I'm super pleased for all 15,000 people and our shareholders at A.O. Smith where it's at today.
Exactly. I think you're right. I've watched small and large businesses, and the ones who were successful here had great teams. So they were the ones that were able to rally behind the mission of the organization. Thank you very much for joining us.
Fair enough.
I appreciate your time. We're on again tomorrow. I'm going to chat with our people here. Thank you very much. I appreciate you watching remotely. Thanks for being with us today. And we'll be here again tomorrow, 10 a.m. to noon, where our focus will be on leadership perspectives. We've got a great lineup. Another speaker from the great state of Wisconsin. We'll hear from Governor Tony Evers. You don't want to miss that. Several other interesting guests and much more to know. So just so you know, all of our videos from our presentations here are available on our YouTube channel, and today's videos will be available starting tomorrow evening. So thank you for joining us, and see you again tomorrow morning.